Hello to all who are with us via Zoom, and hello to everyone tuning in via the SEAPAVAA Facebook page where we are streaming live. Welcome to the 25th SEAPAVAA Conference Symposium 5, themed Reflections on Archival Difficulties. I am Rosemarie, Roque, an individual associate member of SEAPAVAA, and I will be the moderator for this panel. I am joining you live from Manila, Philippines. We will have the opportunity to listen to three speakers, starting with the first presentation titled Trophies and Scar. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce the speaker. Dr. Ray Edmondson is an international consultant, teacher, and writer on audiovisual archiving and documentary heritage issues. He is active in relevant professional associations from which he has received several Lifetime Achievement Awards. He is a recipient of the Medal of the Order of Australia. In 2001, he completed a 33-year career with Australia's National Film and Sound Archive and its predecessors, retiring as its deputy director and first curator emeritus. And his 2012 doctoral thesis analyzes the institution's history. He has undertaken missions for UNESCO and maintained a long involvement in its global Memory of the World project, the Memory of the World program, in which he has held a variety of roles. His major writings include Audiovisual Archiving, Philosophy and Principles by UNESCO, the third edition in 2016, and have been translated into a dozen languages. So let us listen now to Trophies and Scar by Dr. Ray Edmondson of Archives Associate, live from Canberra, Australia.
Thank you, Rose. I wonder if I could have the title slide, please. This presentation picks up on three of the topics in the symposium theme of audiovisual archiving in changing times, successes, failures and challenges. I'm going to narrate a case study in change management, reflections on a major failure, and some observations on the question of generational tension. Next slide, please. This case study arises from the birth of the National Film and Sound Archive of Australia. That was in April 1984, when previously unrelated film and sound sections of the National Library of Australia were separated to form the basis of this new institution. Now, these two operational areas, film and sound archives, had different histories, dealt with different media, had different systems, different worldviews, and different economics. The vision for the new institution was set out in a committee report called Time in Our Hands, which considered two types of structure. One was to keep the two units inherited from the National Library intact. This was the simplest approach, and it was how the NFSA began. But consider the dynamics. By definition, each unit wanted the largest share of the budget provided for the new entity. They were in competition. For historical reasons, the film unit had a larger staff. It started with a much bigger budget, and this reflected the different economics of film and sound preservation as well. Each unit had its own collection control system with which it felt comfortable. Each unit had its own clientele and its own external relationships and tended to jealously guard them. This dynamic proved to be increasingly destructive, typecasting staff as film people or sound people, not as NFSA people. Next slide, please. So the solution was to adopt the second type of structure outlined in Time in Our Hands. That meant removing the structural split between film and sound and restructuring the NFSA on a functional basis. Initially there were 6 units: preservation, access, collection development, cataloguing, research and presentational activities. It also involved the development and introduction of a single collection management and cataloguing database, which we called MAVIS, and conversion and migration of data from the 2 existing databases, FLMS and Sonics. Now this removed the reference points that encouraged competition. It made life a lot easier for users, and it allowed the natural links between material in the 2 previously separate collections to start developing. In Australia, the same creative people worked across all media, that is, radio, television, sound recording, film. So this change reflected the reality of the industries the NFSA dealt with. Was the adjustment difficult? Yes, it was very difficult. It even caused 1 or 2 people to leave. But it did help to build a shared corporate ethos in which individual specialisations could be recognised instead of being typecast with labels. And it's worked that way ever since. Next slide. I'm going to talk about the process of changing the name of the institution. And this happened in the 1990s. Now this seemed like a good idea at the time. In the 1990s, organisations were giving themselves very zappy, trendy, upmarket names to supposedly position themselves in their respective domains. The word archive sounded musty and dusty and old-fashioned, so why not jazz up the NFSA with a new name and a new image that sounds exciting? Now the problem was that this was an answer to a question that nobody was asking. There was actually nothing wrong with the existing self-explanatory name. But the NFSA had a big event coming up, the opening of a new building extension by the Prime Minister. So this would be the ideal time to make a splash. New building, new name. Now, once it started, the idea took on its own momentum and it couldn't be stopped. It was driven by a deadline, so corners were cut in terms of research and consultation. An expensive positioning consultant was hired. Whether wise or not, a change now became inevitable. Fatally, the process was driven by the consultant, not by management. It was made clear to us this was a subject that we, as the executive of the archive, knew nothing about, and we sort of had to follow the consultant. So there was consultation in a stage-managed way that was designed to come up with the predetermined results that the consultants wanted. On the 21st of June 1999, the new name, Screen Sound Australia, was announced to an invited audience of 500 people at a gala opening of the building extension, presided over by the Prime Minister. When the name was announced, there was silence, no applause, only puzzlement. It took quite a while for many people to realise what had just happened. And then came the reaction. Next slide. The first consequence of the change was the loss of what I will call brand equity. The name National Film and Sound Archive was well known nationally and internationally. It had a symbolic meaning for those who had worked to develop the archive and see it become a separate organisation. So its profile had been built over many years. Suddenly, all this equity was abandoned without any transition strategy to the new name, and Screen Sound Australia was presented as a brand new institution. The second consequence was a confusion of identity. The name National Film and Sound Archive perfectly and simply described the status, mission and professional character. It was national, it was film and sound, preservation of film and sound, and professionally it was an archive. So the name perfectly described what the institution was. But nobody knew what a screen sound was. So it invited ridicule, and variations started to circulate. Sunscreen, smoke screen, film sound, film screen, screensaver, cream sound. Worse, it was then discovered that Screen Sound was a proprietary brand name already used by two other organisations, one of which, Screen Sound Proprietary Limited, was suddenly started receiving all of the NFSA's mail. The consultants had not done enough research. The third effect was professional status. The word archive was suddenly forbidden. So had the institution changed its character? Was it still an archive? If not, what was it now? What was its mandate? The NFSA's stakeholders, which included the film and sound industries, had never properly been consulted, and they were not only dismissive of the change, they were angry. Fourth, it had been a rapid and expensive exercise, so rapid that it had got out of control financially, and an emergency audit had to be conducted by an outside consultant to work out where the money had gone. Fifth, the confused image of the institution had an opportunity cost. For example, in sales of products like CDs and VHS cassettes based on the collection. Once the NFSA brand on products was replaced by Screen Sound, sales dropped by half. Six, it was soon obvious that a mistake had been made. But ministers and councils don't like to admit mistakes. So instead of quickly correcting it, which could have been done, the mistake, along with stakeholder anger, was entrenched. I can remember attending meetings where some of those present refused to use the word screen sound. And so you had this surreal discussion with people talking around the point and avoiding naming the institution. It was very, very strange. Now, the original name, National Film and Sound Archive, was reinstated, finally, in 2004. That was 4 years later. But that was after the NFSA had been forcibly amalgamated with the Australian Film Commission a year earlier, in 2003. And that amalgamation was a political consequence of the saga. It was a way of burying a mistake by politically and bureaucratically relocating responsibility for the institution, and so you neuter the complaints. It was the beginning of a dark period for the NFSA, which ended only in 2008, when it finally gained its statutory independence. But that's another story. Next slide. Every institution faces generational change. People retire, and with them go their skills, their corporate memory, their collection knowledge, and their personal contacts. This is critically true in the case of technical skills. With the endless changing of formats and the shift from analogue to digital, audiovisual archives become the place of last resort for the skills to operate and maintain superseded technical equipment. Now, every new generation wants to do its own thing. It's natural. It doesn't want to be held back by yesterday's thinking, and its right to innovate must be respected. If that were not the case, the NFSA itself might never have come to exist. So, the new generation may not automatically seek advice from the previous one, or even listen to it when it's offered. That can mean, though, that it misses out on learning from the previous generation's mistakes as well as its successes. It's important for an institution to document and publish its own history, where it came from, why it's there. Archives do an excellent job at documenting other people's histories, but are often remarkably poor at documenting their own. What are the solutions to generational change? Here are a few, and I'm sure there are others. 20 years ago, the NFSA adopted the concept of the Honorary Curator Emeritus. It's an adaptation of the concept of the Emeritus Professor, which is common in universities. It's a way of identifying former staff members of long experience who hold themselves available as sources of corporate memory, as trainers and as mentors of newer staff. And there's an ethical issue which experienced staff members need to consider on their retirement. Do they walk away from their former professional life, or do they have an implied obligation to declare themselves available as a free memory resource to their former archive? The answer depends on one's personal situation, of course. But one size doesn't fit all. But a number of retired NFSA staff are currently considering the setting up of what is called an NFSA Elders Group as a way of expressing their obligation, that obligation as they see it. It seems that might have a passing resemblance to SEAPAVAA's Fellows Circle, and that's no coincidence. Remember that audiovisual archives are institutions of memory where staff follow a vocation, not just a job. Archives are not anonymous corporations where your moral obligation ends when your employment contract does. Finally, there are friends organisations, which might include former staff, but which also reach out into a much wider circle of an archive's users, donors, advocates and researchers. They provide a sense of community and a source of volunteer effort. The Friends of the NFSA is just one such organisation. And being independent, it can speak out on issues which the NFSA's current staff, as government employees, cannot speak out on. These are ways of empowering and supporting current staff of an archive. It's a way of trying to ensure that the circle gets wider, not smaller, as former staff support their successors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ray, for your presentation. That was truly something we can ponder on. And for all the attendees, for all those in Zoom and Facebook Live, please post your questions, your comments. We are now on the second presentation for Symposium 5, Reflections on Archival Difficulties. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce the second speaker from the Japan Broadcasting Corporation, or NHK. So Nobuki Yoshiyama joined NHK Archives after a career as a reporter and news producer for NHK News for 20 years. Born and raised in Japan, he received 2 bachelor's degrees, one in policy management and another in political science from Keio University in Tokyo, which he claimed is unnecessary. He loves Yukio Mishima, the Beatles, and enjoys cheap wine. So let us listen to Nobuki-san's presentation titled Our Failure, Success, and Challenges, Lessons from a Broadcaster's History. However, For those who are joining us via Facebook Live, please be informed that this second presentation, the slides will not be seen via Facebook and is only available in Zoom and for those attendees in Hanoi. But we can still listen to Nobuki-san. So now I give the floor to Nobuki-san, who's in Tokyo, Japan.
Okay, thank you, Rose, for that hilarious introduction. Friends, I am Nobuki from NHK Archives. Thank you very much for having me. Some of you might remember me. I was in Noumea, New Caledonia, 2 years ago. So it's good to see you again. Okay, let me share the screen. Okay. So this is the theme of the presentation. It is a direct quote from the conference theme. But I believe this is appropriate because our history is indeed a series of failure, success, and challenges. And I'm not going to give you any lesson or lecture, so don't worry. But rather, I'd like to share the lessons we've learned through our experiences. So by the end of this presentation, I hope you will find something you could relate, no matter the size or the nature of the institution to which you belong. Okay, this is how it goes. First, I would like to introduce ourselves very quickly. And next, I will explain our history, including failure and success. And lastly, I will talk about the challenges we face. Okay, let's begin with a quick introduction. And I'm going to show you our introductory video, just the opening of it. If it works, you will hear the English narration and sound too. I hope it works. Okay, here we go.
NHK started its broadcasting in 1925. It has been airing news, drama, music, educational programs, and more for over 19 years. It is NHK Archives that preserves such enormous records of eras with care and serves to pass them on to the future as cultural assets.
Okay, so we're the Archives division of NHK. NHK is often compared with the BBC in the UK because we are both publicly funded broadcasters. We're going to be 100 years old soon, and we have a lot of contents. A lot. I'm not going to read, okay? And we provide our contents to the public through many platforms, through website, social media, including Twitter, Facebook, and so on. And I'd like to go over our website. Our website has many contents in many categories: news, drama, sports, you name it. War testimony is my favorite. You can access from overseas, but some of the footages cannot be shown because of the copyright issues, which is our headache, right? It's really hard to choose, but today I will explain just two of our unique features. One is called Creative Library. It provides archival materials for artistic and creative purposes. Simple production tools are also available. People can download images and even sound effects. And this is mostly for students from primary school to college. And this is pretty enjoyable, okay? And the other is called Reminiscence Therapy Library. This is for the elderly, for senior citizens. Here we provide every nostalgic things from 1940s. They're not only news and programs, but also songs and sceneries, along with pictures of everyday tools, clothing people used to wear, toys, and so on. You can imagine the moment people watch these things, they get younger, they start talking about what they know, how they were back then. Like, oh, I remember this one. I had this. You know, I was there. Things like that. And this activity is believed to stimulate the brain function and creates emotional stability that helps to slow the progression of dementia and relieve symptoms of depression. I believe that's becoming everybody's concern. So if you are interested in any part of my presentation, please contact me. Okay, so that was our quick introduction. We try to provide something for everyone, but I'm not saying we're a perfect archive. In fact, we have a regret. So let's go back to the time they call the 60s. This is NHK Materials Management Division in 1961. The division later became the NHK Archives. So this is us about 60 years ago. As you can see in the back, the film rolls are just left piled up, unattended. They can be deteriorating very quickly. Also, there's a large cabinet with many small drawers. It looks like they were keeping library cards in there. And today we keep them in a media board where the temperatures and the humidity are kept nicely. And instead of handwritten library cards, we use database. We all improve our methods gradually, and that's fine, but we had a huge loss in the past. Now we have staffs and systems to preserve archival materials, but this has started in the 1980s, which is almost 30 years after we started TV broadcasting in 1953. You might be surprised to know that we did not start systematic storage of contents until as late as 1981. So most of the programs produced before the preservation efforts are lost, except for the important news footages and documentaries. This is such a loss. The awareness for archiving came to rise in 1980s, and so we merged different divisions of NHK to put those valuable assets under integrated management. Now the archive is considered as a foundation of a broadcaster. So today we use the term NHK archives to refer to a much wider range of things, including programs and documents and footages, also systems like database and storage facilities. And voila, the rules of archives was dramatically strengthened by digitization. With digitization, we can easily preview and order footages on our laptops. We can provide the material to the production teams much faster. Okay, so now our job is not just to keep some film cans in a dusty vault anymore. Instead, we've been applying new technologies in bringing new life to those archival footages. Let me show you some new tricks. On the left, we have images filmed on 16mm film in 1969 and broadcasted on analog TV. And on the right, we have images restored to 4K HDR. Let's watch for a moment. Okay, I'm muting. So you could actually see the effects far more clearly on 4K monitor, but obviously the details and colors are vivid. And these old programs are now revived in 4K versions and broadcasted on our latest BS 4K channel. The project has been possible because some films from the 60s and 70s survived. Okay. And next up is called AI Assisted Colorization. It is a technology developed by NHK R&D and NHK Archives. And for this, I don't think we need explanation. Let's just watch for a moment.
これ何しとるんで、こがい大事な日に婿さんがおいでるんで。ほじゃけん見とるんよ。お父さん守ってこんとどがいな婿さん。
Okay, obviously the left side is original, black and white, and the right side is the image colorized with AI. This is a scene from a drama broadcasted more than 50 years ago. We experimentally colorized part of them. The point is that previously colorization was costly and required a lot of manpower. But thanks to AI technology, the cost has dropped dramatically. And this technology made the international cooperation great success. Let's move on. 3 years ago, we worked with the Mongolian National Central Archives on a restoration project. The project started when a 30mm film roll was found in their archive. It was a footage of a battle between Japanese and Soviet troops in 1939. We flew to Mongolia with our portable 4K film scanner to digitize the film. Once we finished the digitization, we shared the film with them. And back in Japan, we converted the 4K black and white video into color, and then now footage was used in NHK Special, our flagship documentary series. And now let's watch. Of course, it has no sound. It was a film from 1939. Let me add that we are aware that some film archivists are rather against colorization. They respect the original, and we understand that. And yet, there have been some discoveries too. From the color of the soldiers' badges, we can tell the officers' ranks. We were honored to have been able to work with the Mongolian National Archives. It was their preservation efforts that made this project possible. Okay. So that was our history. And lastly, let's talk about our challenges. March 2021 marked 10 years since the Great East Japan earthquake. It was March 11, 2011, and we cannot miss this topic. NHK held a special exhibition in Tokyo called Disaster and Future. It's held in March, and physical exhibition is over, but we have the exhibit archived on our website. It is open to everyone, especially for those who were unable to visit the venue because of a coronavirus state of emergency. And let me show you the virtual exhibition. I will switch to the website, so please stand by. Okay, can you see the entrance? This is the virtual tour. We proceed to Zone 1. Zone 1. This is where you can watch a video. And it says here, this is a video of a quake as it happened. It is edited from the program aired on NHK World TV. You might remember the horrifying footage of tsunami destroying and swallowing everything like a creature. I'm going to play the video for 40-50 seconds, but it could be disturbing. So if you feel sick, just do not keep watching. Okay. Okay, that's enough, right? Really terrifying. I'll stop here. And I'd like to get back to where we started because I just want to show you just a little more. And as we proceed, we see something. It's some documents. And it says here, it is a memo of an NHK reporter who covered Fukushima nuclear power plant accident. So this is just an introductory part of the entire exhibition. So I hope you will visit our website, okay? And we opened another new website. I'm gonna switch. And this is called Natural Disaster Archives. It has images of, and image and information of natural disasters happened in Japan. We're going to post 300 of them by the end of this year. On the top is a category. From left, we have volcano eruption, heavy rain and flood, typhoon, and so on and on. We have, and each category has timeline. This is the year. You can move vertically. For example, let's take a look at typhoon. And we can jump to 1950s. As we go down, we find 1950 Jane typhoon that hit Japan September of 1950. And if you click, we have statistics. We have that death toll, the damages. We have map. This is how the typhoon crossed Japan. And we have, of course, a video. I'm muting. So when it comes to natural disasters, excuse me, we believe it's important to know what really happened in the past because it can happen anytime again. I mean, it will happen again. And maybe that's what audiovisual archive can do. Okay, so that was kind of exhausting. Let's change the topic. I'm going back to the PowerPoint. Okay. So as to the lost contents of 1960s and 70s, we have program excavation project. We ask viewers to send us recordings of unpreserved programs. It's like searching some hidden gems or digging up the fossil, so we call it excavation. And this is a website where people can enter the information to contact us. And these are the buried treasures, I would say. We welcome old films and tapes, but sometimes people donate related documents such as scripts. And thanks to the contribution from cast, actors, and former production members, more than 7,600 programs have been found so far. Of course, we digitize and preserve them, and some of them have been broadcasted as rerun. Also, we have public viewing event to enjoy those nostalgic programs together. And next, let me quickly go over our technical challenge. 3 years ago, NHK started 4K and 8K UHD broadcasts. They are in ultra high definition, which means ultra large amount of data, ultra high amount of data. There's a technical and budgetary constraint or limitations to preserve those contents. But we learned from the past that we should preserve our contents at their highest quality so that we will be able to reuse them in future. And of course, also in terms of cultural heritage. So ironically, we are facing the same problem we had at the dawn of TV broadcast. We lost contents because no technology was available or virtually too expensive. So we've been keen to find an efficient way to preserve those materials. Let me also note that we might have to continue migration forever, which means that it's going to cost more and that there's a good chance of losing the master data because of some malfunction, hard drive crash. I believe it's called digital dilemma. We're becoming not so sure about depending on this technology. And I don't think we have an answer for that yet. Okay. So that's the end of the topic and brings us to the closing. As I was preparing for this presentation, I noticed that we are almost 100 years old as a broadcaster, but only 18 as an archive, 18 years old. And that's pretty young. So there's just lots to be done, lots to be done. But I always have an encouraging words. And that's what Dr. Ray Edmondson said 2 years ago. And as you can see, I was lucky enough to hear that personally. And you know where this is. Let me quote. There's no perfect archive in the world. We are all work in progress. Where aren't we? I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much. Any question, any inquiry, please email me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nobuki-san, for your presentation. I am equally honored and pleased to introduce our third and last presenter, who will be talking about facing the issues and challenges in preserving Malaysia's audiovisual archives. Our presenter is Norsuriaty binti Awang Hassim, who is presenting from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So let me introduce her. So Suri obtained her Bachelor of Human Science degree, majoring in sociology and anthropology from the International Islamic University of Malaysia in 1997. She then completed her Master of Information Technology in Records and Archives stream from Curtin University of Technology in Perth, Australia in 2011. She has 20 years of experience being an archivist in the National Archives of Malaysia at various sections in NAM's headquarters since 2001, being the director for NAM's Sarawak State Branch 2011 to 2014, and also archive officer at Prime Minister Department 2014 to 2020. Currently, Suri is the head of Strategic Planning and International Relations section in NAM. She experienced few international exposure and was amongst young archivists worldwide, appointed as the flying reporter at the International Council on Archives Congress in Kuala Lumpur in 2008. She also actively involved herself in international training organized by Public Service Department Malaysia, and participated in the 7th Executive Development Program for Malaysia Senior Government, South Korea in 2014, and as well as 12th Private Sector Management Training and Attachment Program at German companies for senior Malaysian public service sector executives in Germany in 2019. So, no further ado, let us now listen to Suri's presentation titled Facing the Issues and Challenges Preserving Malaysia's Audiovisual Archives.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. Thank you, Rose. My fellow presenters, Dr. Ray, Mr. Nobuki. Good afternoon and hello, audiovisual community worldwide. I will start my presentation with one Malay poem relating to my topic today. Happy listening. Records and archives are our evidence important to preserve the country's heritage. In order for AV to remain persistent, issues and challenge we need to manage. I'm Norsuriaty Awang Hassim from National Archives of Malaysia. For the next 20 minutes, I will bring all of you through my presentation journey entitled facing the issues and challenges in preserving Malaysia's audiovisual archives. Before I start, I would like to thank SEAPAVAA for giving me and Mrs. Rosalind the opportunity to participate in this conference. Next. As an overview, I will highlight 5 segments as stated on the screen. I will start with my introduction, followed by audiovisual archives in NAM, our issue and challenges, NAM's way forward, and lastly, my conclusion. Next slide. For my introduction, I would like to share AV landscape and development in Malaysia. National Archives of Malaysia, I will only mention our acronym NAM after this, was established on 1st of December 1957, known as Public Records Office, and we changed our name to National Archives of Malaysia in 1963. Our AV collection in NAM started in the early 1960s, whereby we managed to acquire a lot of historical photographs at that time. SEAPAVAA was founded in 1996, and not far from that, we also got government support to build a National Center for AV in Malaysia. Our AV building completed in 2009, and we had our policy on AV2 in 2010 and started big digitization project in 2011. In Malaysia, we are not the only one who dealing with AV. There are also other agencies involved. For AV production mainly, it is under the jurisdiction of our National Film Development Corporation Malaysia, PINAS, and our Department of Broadcasting Malaysia, RTM. We in NAM focus more on the AV preservation, though we also doing a little bit of in-house production. Let's wrap up my helicopter view on AV development in Malaysia. Let's move to my next slide. This is our National AV Center located at our headquarters in Kuala Lumpur. It has 4 levels housing our AV collections acquired from official and non-official sources. Next. To manage our AV collections, we also develop our AV policy. There are 5 strategies within this policy. For development, we focus on acquisition. We acquire AV materials from government agencies, non-government, either from an institution or association, and also individual, locally and internationally. We use 3 methods. First, legal deposit for public records based on mandate from our National Archives Act 2003. Second, we purchase, for example, videos and photographs. Third, we also persuade, especially our production house, to deposit their artwork to our archive. For planning, we have internal setup with a specific division and section established to manage our AV. There are archives management division and also our audiovisual archives section. For the preservation strategy, we emphasize on security aspects such as intellectual property, copyright, legal issue, and ownership, which some relate to many parties. As for the access, researchers are able to come to our research hall to borrow our physical AV collection or browsing our online finding aids, or for our digitized AV. In terms of human resource, AV preservation demands of skilled and experienced staff to pass down their knowledge and expertise. Next. History of digitization in NAM started in 1995 with our data commission project. This was just a small project digitizing our historical photographs. In 2011, after the establishment of our AV Center, we had our MyCC project, we call it, We digitized AV collections from analog to digital, and through this project too, we managed to set up our digitization lab. Next slide. These are AV collections in our holding. We kept historical films mostly from our national film. Many of our audio collection consists of oral history recordings using open reel, and also vinyl records and cassettes from local recording companies. On top of that, the video collection comprises of in-house recordings and other collections from government agencies, as well as personal collection. As I mentioned earlier, we do acquire photographs collection since the 1960s. Next slide. Here are some photos of our AV storage for films, cassette, and vinyl records. We have 3 special repositories that keep our AV collection. Next. In this slide, we have samples of our magnetic tapes, such as open reel collections for our oral history recordings, original photographs, and videotapes. All our collections are arranged by accession numbers for tracking purposes. Now, let's move to my next topic on issues and challenges. I believe that managing AV is not a rocket science, but we have to plan and manage it efficiently. From our experience in Malaysia, I would like to share 4 major issues and challenges we faced in preserving AV collections. First, on technology, followed by expertise, climate, and lastly on high cost. I will explain them individually. My next slide, please. Preserving AV relates with technology. We often come across with the term technology obsolescence, be it on hardware or software. In NAM, we do have some machines and software that are still workable, but no longer available in the market. Therefore, long-term planning is very crucial to face rapid change on technology to ensure our AV collections can still be preserved, readable, and assessed in future. Next. In terms of technology, security aspects should be of our concern. How brilliant the machines are, the same as well with human. So we need to protect intellectual property, our intellectual control of our preserved AV, as I mentioned in my earlier slide. Next slide. Moving to issue on expertise, we are still lacking of SME and working on our capacity building. 10 years of experience preserving AV collections. Yes, we have done a lot of digitization and preservation under coordination of our AV, digital, and IT sections. Yet, we still need a lot of trainings, exposures, and hands-on to equip our staff. One of the biggest challenges is we don't have permanent expertise on AV preservation due to staff's transfer for promotion or job rotation. To be an expert on AV preservation, we need overseas exposure and knowledge transfer from international experts, because we don't have our local experts at the moment. Perhaps we need high time for us to think about it. I do believe that failure and success experience will bring us towards a better future for AV preservation. Next. Climate. Malaysia is a tropical country with a very high humidity and always get heavy rain. We also sometimes facing a really hot weather. The fluctuate of weather has also direct impact to our preservation effort. For archiving purposes, we really need to control our temperature, humidity, with the support of 24/7 air conditioning. This is to ensure that every collection are protected from damage. Next slide. Generally, these are some damages that might affect our AV collections. If the temperature is too hot or too humid, it will trigger chemical reaction. When there is continuous heat, it may cause, for example, wrinkle and color fading to our AV materials. If it is too humid, the collection might suffer of fungus or vinegar syndrome, to mention a few. Next slide. Preserving AV requires huge amount of dollars and cents. It is indeed a costly business. A long-term planning and investment is crucially needed. Maybe to consider buying suitable systems, to buy equipment for digital preservation, for licensing, because we outsource maybe, for instance, maintenance of course, training overseas, like I mentioned earlier, temperature control for air conditioning. In my opinion, this is one of the driving factors to the success of AV preservation. And another thing, getting the buy-in from stakeholders is important too, as this is one of the national agenda to preserve the nation's heritage. Next. Having mentioned all the 4 issues and challenges, I strongly recommend 2 future directions for AV preservation. First, we need to collaborate or network or do partnership, and also to build our SME. Both suggested initiatives need to be strategically planned internally, locally, and internationally. If, let's say, we have already something, in place at the moment, so we need to enhance it. If we haven't done anything yet, we need to think of starting it. Like this conference, it is one of the platforms that we can benefit from. Indeed, preserving AV is not a silo business. When there is a will, there is a way. Next. To sum up, together we plan, manage, and preserve our sound and visual collections because they are priceless heritage to our country. It is our responsibility to ensure its longevity for future generations. Do not wait for perfection, because preserving AV is a continuous and collaborative effort to face all the issues and challenges. That's all from me. For those who have ventured into this business, do take it as a sharing. For those who haven't started, hopefully my humble presentation will be an eye-opener. With that, I end my presentation. Terima kasih. Thank you. Back to you, Rose.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Suri. Thank you to all our presenters. So we have now listened to all of them. We are still in Symposium 5, Reflections on Archival Difficulties. So now we head to hopefully a very engaging question and answer portion. So let us start. I see here via Zoom, Martino Cipriani asked a question. So to Nobuki Yoshiyama, is the AI assisted colorization entirely developed by NHK, or is it done in collaboration with other institutions? Which one, if it's done with other institutions? So any university involved in its development?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I can answer that. The answer is it's developed by NHK. Okay, it's an internal collaboration of NHK Archives and the NHK R&D. NHK R&D is where those scientists and engineers work. They work very hard, anyways. So let me tell you what I know about this technology. AI learned some 8 million different images in our archive to enable this technology. That's all I know about this technology. So if you'd like to know more, you could email me or... Thanks for the question. Is that okay?
I really hope more questions can keep on coming. But actually, when you were presenting, of course, in Facebook, people can only listen you present and not see the images. And we would just like to inform them that I know Nobuki-san would like to share them, but because of copyright issues, yes, we had to limit what can be live streamed. So for Dr. Ray Edmondson, can you kindly expound on your role as the first curator emeritus of NFSA? Can you discuss more about this role and how this helps face the difficulties you mentioned faced by NFSA?
Oh, thank you, Rose. It was a role I was given on my retirement back in 2001, and now I've been joined by 3 others who are curator emeritus in a particular area. I have to say that I haven't been called on very often, and sometimes I have intruded myself when I felt there needed to be something said, because I think there's a natural reluctance for people to simply take the initiative or to feel that they're empowered to ask someone who doesn't work there any longer but who is an occasional visitor. So I also happen to be the president of the Friends Association, so for that reason alone I'm still a regular visitor to the NFSA, and I have other reasons for talking to various staff members, but really I often have taken the initiative to, when I know something is happening and maybe my comment can be useful, to inject myself. And I know that there's there is a reluctance, unless somebody knows you well and they know a particular area and question they want to ask, well then they might do it. But otherwise, if you're someone they don't know from having worked with originally, then you're a bit of a stranger from outside, and can they feel comfortable about phoning you up or asking you a question? So I don't know. It's something that it's an idea we adapted from university, where an emeritus professor is someone who is no longer has gets a salary or has a regular teaching role, but they're there to do research projects and to be used in various ways, sometimes mentoring students. And the logic behind it is, when you leave, you take so much with you that in a sense still belongs to the archive. And your memory is a part of the archive's memory, and so much is never written down, and so much is not passed on, so if you have particular skills, and so my skills are not technical, but there are others whose skills are technical, they can be active teachers in teaching people to repair or use old equipment, because they've used it for so long. Mine, I guess, are more cerebral. My memory of the way the collection grew, and of our relationships and things like that. So in that case, it's really it's talking to people about certain things. I think it's a valuable role, and I think it needs to be emphasised more. I think it's a transportable idea, because in the NFSA has a staff of about 160 people. That's 20% less than it had in about 12 years ago. This is what's happening in Australian collecting institutions. Budgets and staff are declining, and so more and more memory is actually held outside rather than inside, and we really have to try to compensate for that wastage and keep that memory available. So these are the times we live in.
Thank you, Dr. And definitely, when you said a while ago in your presentation that archiving is not just a job, we indeed felt those words. We really, truly related to it. And you being the curator emeritus, I think I can personally say that this extends not just to Australia and FSA, but to all of us. You're very global.
But I think Rose, I think we're all very global, and that's why these sorts of things are so important. Now, I've learned a lot from the symposium yesterday and today, and we really are participants in each other's challenges. I think we have to see it that way, because globally, numerically, we are not a large number of people. You put together all the people who work in audiovisual archives around the world, you'll be lucky to get to 5 figures. We are not a huge profession, but we are a vital profession because we hold all this memory in our hands. So we all have to be available.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for those words. And so now may we ask Suri to ask a question here from Joshua. He said, has there been any projects to digitize NAM's at-risk magnetic media by deadline 2025?
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Joshua, for asking. Actually, this is one of the, it's included in our yearly planning. So, yeah, and from, getting information from this conference on the deadline 2025, it should be of our priority to look into it, seriously. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Suri. And now we maybe go back to Nobuki-san. A question from me. Actually, I would like to ask. Despite the failures, like especially the lost heritage you mentioned, how was the excavation project helping you with, still tracking, finding the memory?
Yes, exactly.
Tracked.
It is an ongoing project. We are open to just general public, and they are really helping us. There have been just new discoveries once in every 2-3 months, and we are really surprised. So yes, I believe a lot more will be discovered. There are more and more hidden gems, I hope.
Yes, actually, can we continue with you? There's a first question that should be asked. The website you have built is very good for managing disaster archives in Japan.
Thank you.
So this from Aris Biati. So we also built a disaster literacy website, but problem is documents or AVs very scattered on TV stations or probably other private institutions, while website is built by a government agency. So can you kindly tell how the best way to collect AV collections spread across various institutions?
Oh, well, thanks for another good question. I think it's pretty difficult to correct to one location, those materials. I think I'm not answering the question. I know I'm not answering the question directly, but one way would be to have a link, internet link with the local government, national government. We actually have a link, so you can jump to, other excellent website to see various different contents. We have, for example, as I mentioned in my presentation, war testimony website where you can jump to, for example, Hiroshima Peace Museum. So maybe some people visit the Hiroshima Museum and then they could come to us. So that's one way of sharing valuable contents. That's what I think.
Thank you, Nobuki-san. So now we have, I'm happy. I'm seeing lots of questions now. This is truly getting exciting. So for Suri, there's a question here. Does NAM maintain a database of Malaysian experts in film and sound who can assist the NAM staff with transfer of their expertise. And also, may I just relate to a question related to training and exposure through hands-on program and on-the-job training, since you mentioned about no expert on AV preservation yet. So how do you also plan to address this, even we are in the middle of a pandemic? You can unmute, Suri.
Yeah. So eager to answer and then forgot to unmute. All right. So two questions, I believe there. So in terms of the database, yes, at the moment we do have, a database of names, expert on films and whatnot. But I think we need to enhance on that and then look at it, in depth on enhancing the, whatever planning for it. So we need, I think, more closely with National Film and our Department of Broadcasting, and also perhaps players from our private sector who's already, active in TV or digitization area. On the second question, on the is it like our job rotation? Is it training again, Rose?
Your plan to address the training and exposure to a hands-on program. How do you plan to address that matter since we are in the middle of a pandemic? Actually, you can also maybe connect it to a question by Joshua about, did I miss it now? But something about the effect of the pandemic. And
Yeah. Due to this pandemic thing, of course, we cannot have, like those days, physical trainings, physical, say, workshops and whatnot. So we take the advantage of, sharing through online platforms to gain knowledge. So at least we equip ourselves with the theories or progress worldwide. So due to pandemic, that's all that we can done at the moment, and we will plan further ahead prior to, after the post pandemic. Yeah.
Yes. Quite challenging for all of us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's easy to say rather than mentioning, but yeah, plan it to be planned, and we see what best or what suitable to be taken out first or need to be done first, which we need to prioritize. Yes.
I'm sorry, that was Sanchai's question, not Josh, was about the effect of the pandemic to NAM. But anyway, let's proceed to Doc Ray. There's a question for you, Dr. Ray. It's about Lai T asks, has oral history been considered in documenting such memories of retired NFSA staff?
The answer is yes. There are quite a number of oral histories of staff members. There are some who haven't been done yet. I think there are some who still need to be carefully documented. The way it's done at the NFSA is actually the recordings are done by a voluntary group. It has a long name. Its acronym is AMOHG. You can look up its website. They actually discuss among themselves who needs to be recorded. They organise the recording, they prepare for it, they organise the recording. The NFSA supplies the equipment and the documentation because both parties have to agree on access and so on. And so, yes, that is done. I've been recorded. I made a very, very long oral history with another long-standing staff member. The question is that people need to know where to go and look. And sometimes in oral history, if it's done chronologically, all right, it covers a lot of things in sequence, but it can't get into a lot of detail about collection items or specifics. Sometimes you need a just one-on-one conversation with somebody to talk about a particular area of the collection. And to give an example, the NFSA is called on as a footage source for documentary television specials, and there was a recent series called Australia in Colour, so it was colorised footage from the collection, covering various events or time frames in 20th century history, and it was very good. But I looked at it and I thought, look, if I had been speaking to the researchers or the producers, I would have chosen different footage, because I know the collection and I know what would have worked better in a particular case. And look, there's in a sense, I can't park that knowledge in somebody else's head. You know, I can say, I remember these things about the collection, or if a researcher came to an access person at the NFSA and said, this is the project I'm working on, help me find the right footage, a conversation with that staff member, I could suggest where they might go and look, for example, to find what they needed. So much knowledge of collection isn't picked up on catalogue records. Might be better picked up by AI. That's something that we're starting to learn about now, about how you find your way into a collection through artificial intelligence. But so much just sticks in your head about what piece of footage from this film or this television program or this radio program would actually work in this context, and you can suggest that. One of the creative aspects of working in an archive and working in Access is you collaborate with the filmmaker or the producer, and you bounce ideas off each other, and you say, look, we've got this might work here, how about this? And it can be very satisfying that you would have this creative input into the finished product. Now, you don't get a credit for it, but you make that contribution, you know you've made it. And so when those opportunities arise to talk about specifics in the collection, or to say, to pick up Nobuki's point, the quality of what survives is not what it should have been, or something didn't survive when it should have survived. There is, for example, a lot of material in the NFSA that many years ago was copied onto 16mm instead of 35mm because it was cheaper. It wasn't enough money. Okay, the resulting image is not nearly as good as it should have been, and it's a poor representation of the original. And I'm not sure that staff members who come across those things know that that's the reason why that was done. So all of these things are just the background knowledge of the collection that you pick up. Sometimes you could convey this to staff in a group discussion, sometimes on one-on-one in the right situation. So I think those are things that you can't quite get in oral histories except in general terms. But what's important about oral histories is if you can document the history of the institution and its turning points and its mistakes and its successes in some chronological way, that I think needs to be generally known, and I think institutions need to make this information more available on their websites to give some shape and meaning to the history of the institution. As I said in my presentation, we are very bad at documenting our own histories. We document everybody else's. It's important that we have a sense of our own place in the scheme of things and document our own history and our own journey.
Thank you. I'm really excited. We have so much questions. So from Dave Dadugo, I think anyone can answer. The question is, clearly the obsolescence of playback equipment poses challenge to AV preservation. So what do we do to those materials whose playback equipment doesn't exist anymore? Is it reasonable to keep them still or wait for future technology? So he added, knowing that these materials will deteriorate along the way. So maybe Nobuki-san, can you respond?
Thank you. That's a very difficult question because, as I told you in my presentation, I don't have an answer for this. But that's right. It is a common sense for us now that, not to throw away films after digitization. Even after digitization, keep them, okay? Because, as I said, back in 60s, 70s, people never imagined, 4K, 8K technology will come out and you could reuse them again, revive the films. So, but also, the longer we wait, the film will deteriorate. That it's true. So, what are you gonna do? That's the challenge we face now. At least that's my observation.
Thank you. And may I ask 2 questions for Suri? So this one, what are are the archives open to the public? Are there any activities or efforts done for NAM in reaching out to the public? And a second one is, what can we contribute to ASEAN integration in terms of knowledge sharing in universities, in terms of our AV collection? So the access to NAM given the pandemic and knowledge sharing.
Okay, thank you, Rose. Thank you for the questions. The first question, at the moment, due to pandemic thing, and in Malaysia, actually, we're in the stage of so-called total lockdown, and our research hall is closed for public at the moment. But we do encourage all our researchers locally, internationally. They can access our online finding aids for materials, for whatever available in our online, so they can do bookings and whatnot later on. Apart from that, we also take this I think due to this pandemic time now, we use the MedSource, our social media platform, to educate, to get outreach to our customers, engage with them with our posters on our collections, our services, and then also relating with any important announcements pertaining to our archive. So we are not quiet. So we get in touch, engage with them through MedSource through this tough time. So the second question, on ASEAN, something to do with ASEAN. So I would like to take this opportunity from this platform to perhaps encourage, or maybe we can think of using SYMPOSIUM as platform to start or initiate, from universities on every collections and whatnot, in SYMPOSIUM, so we can enhance our collection from ASEAN countries. We have 10 ASEAN countries in SYMPOSIUM. Perhaps, we can go on the on your mark, get set, go platform for it. Nothing is impossible, but it can be done. I believe in it. Thank you.
And I would like to read Joshua Nang's comment. He said, I am a Malaysian. So Joshua is a SEAPAVAA individual member, and he's saying that on AV archiving knowledge transfer, he is keen to discuss opportunities with you. Yeah. So how can you continue from here? So I guess you will be sending emails and messages. Definitely.
We're looking forward. We're open for it. We're looking forward. We want to get better and better. Of course, like I see in my presentation, dealing with AV preservation is not a silo business. We need to, of course, at the moment, we are not silo, I believe, but we can enhance whatever we have done so far.
And
let's together to face everything. Yeah.
definitely.
Thank you, Joshua, wherever you are.
So nice to witness this, those collaboration, upcoming ones. So, Dr. Ray, we have a question for you. Mergers and reorganizations are part of change management the archives face. On branding, how would you advise to market the archives to the general audience that make us distinctively different from a national library? That's from Junpok.
Okay, that's a good question. Look, reorganisations are part of change management. They happen all the time. So, and there's a large discussion in literature about that. On branding, there is a literature, and if you contemplate changing your name or changing your image, there's a literature to read, and it's worth studying up on that to know what things you should take into consideration. I think to have a distinctive image, that's critical. I think a self-explanatory name is a good idea because it answers a lot of. You don't have to go into any further explanation to say who you are. National Film and Sound Archive is 5 words, a bit of a mouthful, but it is self-explanatory. You truncate that to an acronym, NFSA, and the way the National Film and Sound Archive now markets itself currently is by its initials and by its logo, which is a stylised kookaburra. That's an Australian native bird with a distinctive appearance and a distinctive sound, and therefore it's easy to strike chords with that. It has a slogan, Australia's Living Archive, and a slogan can be a good thing. Now, these things you have to sort of work on and test, but if you have these things that sort of stick in people's memories, then the recognition comes very easily. So, distinctive logo, acronym, or something other shorthand that people can latch onto. A slogan, if it's unique and memorable, these things all help. When you provide footage for television, you watermark it with your logo. So people get to know where the footage comes from. They get to know who you are, and you, as far as possible, this goes for all institutions. You try to cultivate your public face, make yourself visible, have distinctive events, ways of drawing public attention to what you do. When you have good news, put out a press release. Cook up stories. The most recent press release that the NFSA put out was about digitising some footage of Nellie Melba, who was a famous Australian singer from about 100 years ago. The media picked it up. And a further way that I think works for us in Australia is a register. We have something called the Sounds of Australia. This is a national register of the really important recordings of the last century. And every year, 10 new items are added to that register, and people are invited to submit items and so on. There's a process. It's amazing how much publicity that gets. For some reason, this intrigues people. So you grab public imagination by a project that's associated with your brand, with your institution, and with the work that it does. All these things, you can look up Sounds of Australia on the website. You'll see what's on the list and why, and you'll work out why. And it's not just songs or bits of music. It's other bits of audio that have caught people's imagination, or it might be, for example, the signature theme of ABC Radio News, or it might be a commercial, like the Aeroplane Jelly song. I won't explain what that is, but you can look that up. That's almost like Australia's second national anthem. It's a commercial for a dessert. But every Australian knows the words. So these, when you latch onto these things that are easily recognisable in the public mind, they're associated with your institution, and that triggers the recognition. So, but the literature is there. You can read up about branding, positioning, reorganisation. It's just worth doing, and you make use of that knowledge.
I'm really excited to be seeing continuous flow of questions, but it's, I have to wrap this up. So thank you, everyone. Hafiza was a question. I know you can contact Dr. Ray anytime. And for all those who have other responses, please let us not limit ourselves in this venue. Let us continue reaching out to each other. So let us say goodbye for now for this session. Thank you, Doc Ray. Thank you, Nobuki-san. Thank you. Suki. Thank you very much to everyone in Hanoi, in Facebook Live, in Zoom.